Anyway, could you just go over just your credentials real quick so that everyone can understand that? Because I think some missed that part. So
okay,
let's just do this again.
I have a PhD in physiology and cellular biology, and I have an MD from the University of Missouri in medicine, and I'm a board-certified pediatrician, and I practiced for 30 years before I retired, and now I teach full-time. I teach physiology, anatomy, pathophysiology, and all the clinical sciences in a nursing school in the Kansas City area. So I have to tell you that in medical school, we teach physicians about nutrition is zero. We get it in the first 20 minutes of our first class, and that's it. So everything that I've learned about nutrition, I've learned from people that I've worked with, and from one of my fraternity brothers who also is an MD.
Line muted.
And he is chairman of the nutrition department at the University of California at Los Angeles, UCLA. So there's a variety of sources, but all of this occurred after I was done with my schooling. So I don't know if you were able to hear, but I also worked in Linus Pauling's lab, and Linus Pauling is one of the four people that have 2 Nobel Prizes, one of which was on his work with vitamin C. So I had the privilege of working in his lab on one of his research projects while I was in college. So that's a little bit about me, and I sort of want to talk a little bit about what makes us tick. But before I do that, I want to go back 40,000 years ago. And the reason why I picked 40,000 years ago is that our bodies genetically today are still geared to the way they were 40,000 years ago. That means what our ancestors ate and did 40,000 years ago, our bodies still expect us to do that. Now, I'm going to pose a question. I did this to Stefan this morning, and he didn't know the answer, and it's a very interesting question. 40,000 years ago, what were the 2 leading causes of death for humans? And I will give you a hint. One of them only occurred in half the population. The other one occurred in the whole population. So let's take the whole population first. The number 1 cause of death was being eaten by a wild animal. We didn't have cancer. We didn't have high blood pressure. We didn't have toxins. We didn't have all the things that we are faced with today. But we had to outrun the food that we were trying to eat. Otherwise, they would eat us for the same reason. The other only occurred in half the population. And that was childbirth and childbirth complications. We didn't have doctors. We didn't have nurses. We didn't have midwives. We just delivered naturally, and some of the women didn't make it during childbirth. Some of them didn't make it within the first month afterwards, and that was the second leading cause of death. So what are we looking at today? We have cancer. We have cancer in kids so much today that 50 years ago, we didn't have any pediatric oncologists. Those are the doctors that specialize in taking care of pediatric cancer. But today, we don't have enough. There was a recent study published a couple months ago that showed in cord blood of newborns, they looked at 300 in one hospital. In those 300, there were over 200 toxins in the cord blood that didn't exist before 1940. So you ask, why do we see so much disease now? Why do we see autism? Why do we see cancer? Why do we see arthritis? A whole host of other illnesses. And it's because of what we're exposed to and how we handle them. So this morning what I want to do is go through a little of the history about why we eat what we eat, or why we should eat what we eat, and why we're not getting the nutrition that our ancestors 40,000 years ago. couple of years ago, when my son graduated with his PhD in anatomy from Johns Hopkins University, I went to the ceremony, and his boss, his major advisor, asked what I was doing. And since I had retired, I told him I was teaching on nutrition, and we started talking about the caveman diet and all that. And he did the research on Lucy. Lucy is the 1.2 million-year-old hominid, our closest ancestor. And he said that genetically, she was programmed to eat the same thing that we are programmed to eat. So our genes haven't changed at all, and that's probably what's gotten us into trouble. So let's go on this, and we'll try this. All right. Life expectancy in the United States in 1950 was 65 years. My father died when he was 53 years of age of heart disease. Today, the life expectancy is more than 77 years. And if we continue on this trend, we're going to live even longer. And a lot of us will be living a quarter of our lives in retirement in a time where we should be healthy, but many of us are not because of the things that we eat or don't eat. I always like to say, you are what you eat, but more realistically, after working with my friends, you are what you don't eat. And so that's why today's talk is very important. So what we do today, or actually what we do when we were young, determines how we're going to be when we get older. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have two wonderful grandchildren, and when I turned 53, I thought my life was over because my grandfather had died early, my father died early, and now I've beaten that by more than a decade, and I have two wonderful grandchildren, and I got so much I want to do. I don't want to be unhealthy. So I have changed the way I've lived, changed the way I've eaten, and changed what I supplement into my body. And we're going to talk about that today. Okay? Let's go on to the next slide. Look at these two women. They're approximately the same age. But obviously the one on the left represents a good percentage of our older individuals, and the one on the right obviously changed the way she lived. These are just examples of what we can do if we live right, eat right, and take care of our bodies. Again, these women are approximately the same age, and I don't know about you, but I would rather live like the one on the right to an older age because I have too much to do before my time is done on this earth. So we live longer, but unfortunately, the majority of us live less healthy. Now, we don't die of the same illnesses and diseases that we died of 100 years ago. We don't see tuberculosis like we used to. Polio is practically eradicated on Earth. We don't even talk about smallpox except when we worry about terrorist attacks. But we have done a lot in the last 100 years, and we've actually done a tremendous amount even before that. So again, 100 years ago, we had polio, lots of malaria, tuberculosis, many diseases that we had no medications for. But through the wonderful workings of scientists and physicians, medicine eliminated a lot of the diseases that we died from. And one of the reasons that this happened is that we started working with electron microscopes and looking at the cell. And I tell my students when I teach that to have a healthy body, you have to have healthy cells. We have over 600 trillion cells in our body, and these cells determine what happens to our body. So cells become tissues, tissues become organs, organs become organ systems. And if those are all healthy, you get a healthy organism, in this case a human. And our cells are no different than the single cells that you find in pond water, the amoeba, the paramecia, the tetrahymena, the things that in 1715, Antony Leeuwenhoek, the developer of that microscope that you're looking at in front of you, He examined a drop of pond water and was amazed to see that pond water teeming with life. Well, each of those individual cells is as complex as every cell in our body. And if we can keep the cells healthy, then the body stays healthy. Obviously, it's a cascade. Healthy cells, healthy tissues, healthy tissues, healthy organs, healthy organs, healthy organ systems. And if our organ systems, circulatory, respiratory, digestive, urinary, if they're all healthy, the organism, the human, is healthy. So today, we have people that die of degenerative disease like cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, arthritis. And scientists and doctors are becoming more convinced that free radical damage, the damage that's done by the things that occur in life, and I'll talk about this in great detail in a little bit, these are the things that are causing our bodies to have degenerative disease. So, we now have degenerative diseases that occur inside the cells. And again, it's a cascade, it goes all the way up. So if the cells are damaged, tissues are damaged, organs are damaged, you see the pattern. And unfortunately, it's going to take another 10 years before the general public will become aware of the solutions. A couple years ago, I worked for the U.S. Census Bureau in the 2010 census, and I had the privilege of working with all the Native American tribes in the 6th state area where I live. And I got to meet some of their medicine men, and medicine men are important in Indian society. And so I asked one of them, how do you know what to give somebody to make them well or keep them well, and what not to give? And he looked at me and he chuckled and he said, we watch the animals. Animals know better than we do. If they took something and ate it and they got well, we gave it to our friends. If they took something and they died, we didn't give it to them. So for 5,000 to 10,000 years, we've had people that have looked to Mother Nature to take care of all sorts of problems. And right now, we've got things that are just phenomenal. We put chemicals in our water to sterilize them, but these chemicals do damage. I'm talking about fluorine for the fluoride treatments. I'm talking about chlorine to kill the bacteria. The National Geographic Society sponsored a research study 3 or 4 years ago, and a gentleman went from northeast United States to southwest United States and sampled bloods from people that lived in a variety of areas, and he was looking for specific toxins. And in everybody that he sampled, 100% of them had 100% of the toxins he was looking for. So it's everywhere. It doesn't matter if you live in a big city or you live on a small rural farm. We're all exposed to the same thing. And unfortunately, the damage it does to our cells causes degenerative disease. Dr. Packard at the University of California, Berkeley, wrote a book a number of years ago, and he proposed that all disease, not just degenerative disease, but all disease had to do with the lack of antioxidants. So let's look at our cells. So this is a graphic representation of the cell, and I have to tell you that when I was in school, half of these things hadn't been discovered yet, because I was fortunate that I was one of the first people to get to use an electron microscope where we could actually see things in cells that you couldn't see with the regular microscope. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details. I just want to point to these little, they almost look like cut open peanuts with the squiggly lines. These are called mitochondria. These mitochondria produce all the energy. And unfortunately, when mitochondria are damaged, cells become damaged. And a lot of the toxins, a lot of the things that we do to our bodies affect the mitochondria. So I'm going to give you a very, very brief lecture on chemistry. This is a healthy atom. And when I say healthy, it means that whatever the number of electrons that circle this atom. They're normal, okay? But things that happen in our body, things that we're exposed to, we make what are called free radicals. And if you notice, this free radical almost looks like this healthy atom, except it's missing an electron. So through normal metabolism, through reading a book, going to work, breathing the air, drinking the water, eating the food, being exposed to toxins, sometimes atoms in our body lose an electron and become free radicals. Now, free radicals are dangerous because free radicals can go attack the mitochondria, they can attack the nucleus, they attack the cell, and changes get done. And sometimes these changes lead to cancer or degenerative disease or just illness in general because it affects our immune systems and our bodies can't defend. So there are certain things that we can take. They're called antioxidants. And you notice this antioxidant has a lot of electrons. And what ends up happening, and you'll see on a subsequent slide, is that they're willing to donate one of these electrons to here, and this free radical gets neutralized and becomes a healthy atom again and causes no damage. So where do we get these antioxidants? Well, Mother Nature and God have provided us with a whole slew of things. It's the fruits and vegetables that we eat. It's some of the other things. 40,000 years ago, we didn't have McDonald's. We didn't have 7-Elevens. We ate fruits, vegetables, grains. Now, these are not the fermented grains that we get in. I live on the border of Kansas and Missouri, so Budweiser is very, very popular in this part of the country. I'm not talking about fermented grains. I'm talking about grains that we eat, saps, sugars, mushrooms. These are the things we ate. We did not eat a lot of meat because, unfortunately, meat ate us first. So we had no refrigeration, so maybe we get meat 1 or 2 days out of the week. But the rest of the time, we were sustaining ourselves on things that were readily available. And these antioxidants are found abundantly, or used to be found abundantly, in the fruits and vegetables that we eat. So let's talk about what exactly these free radicals do. And we have all these mitochondria. This is a scanning electron micrograph of a mitochondria, and you can see how complex it is. And these little squiggly things increase the amount of area within this small part of the cell that allows us to metabolize sugar into energy. But let's talk about this. And this example comes from Dr. Strand. I kind of like it. Just envision yourself. It's a nice winter day. You've got a nice roaring fire going, and you don't have a screen for protection on your fireplace. And every once in a while, a cinder will pop and come out here onto the rug. Now, if you don't have any protection, after a while, this rug is going to become moth-eaten, or appear to be moth-eaten because of all the cinders. Well, that's a free radical. Free radicals come to these mitochondria and begin to do damage within the mitochondria, so the body can't produce energy. The body can't do the things it's supposed to do. And after a while, the damage is permanent. So if you put a screen on this fireplace, every once in a while you're going to get an ember that'll pop through the screen. But the rug, which is like our bodies, maintains its integrity. So we need to find food sources that are high in antioxidants. And there are some that are available, but I have to tell you a story. When my mother was pregnant with me, my kids will tell you it was back in the Stone Ages, but it's not quite that old. She could maintain her pregnancy by eating 2 peaches a day. That gave her enough vitamin A and folic acid to help my brother, who's a couple of years younger than I am. If she were alive today and pregnant, she would have to eat 53 of the same peach to get the same amount of nutrients that she got 65 years ago. So it's important that we find food sources that give us these antioxidants. So let's go back. Here's our free radical. Here's our healthy atom. and here's our antioxidant. This is what happens. The first step, you can see there's a transfer of an electron here. And when this is balanced out, this free radical has been neutralized and becomes a healthy atom. And by doing this, it's neutralized. We stop the chain reaction. We no longer have anything that can come back and affect our DNA, cause a cancer, cause a disease. So that's what's important. And if we don't get the proper nutrition, when we get older, we tend to get sicker, and then we end up with diseases. And as Dr. Packard wrote, most of these diseases probably come from lack of antioxidants. Antioxidants are very, very important. Now, a friend of mine, who's chairman of the Department of Nutrition, Human Nutrition at UCLA, he also holds an MD and a PhD. He had a news conference back in the late 90s, and he said that there was enough evidence now that if we changed the way we ate and supplemented with a few things, we could affect a whole host of illnesses that we potentially could get. And I've used that example on a number of occasions when I have spoken about nutrition. It's very important to remember. And in 2002, the American Medical Association recommended to its member physicians that everybody, man, woman, and child, should have some sort of supplementation of vitamins and minerals, because the quality of vitamins and minerals, which are the majority of our antioxidants, don't exist anymore. They're in small quantities, and we're not getting the nutrition that our ancestors got. So it's very important to find the right foods to eat. And unfortunately, we don't always get that choice. I live in the middle of the United States, and today the high is going to be in the low 60s. In another month or so, we're going to be down near freezing, and we're not going to be able to grow fruits and vegetables. So we're going to have to get our foods from other sources. In the Kansas City area, we unfortunately get a lot of our food from South America in the wintertime because they're warm and we're cold. But what happens when you go ahead and pick something that's ripe? And I'm going to explain what it really means to be ripe in a minute. But let's talk about bananas that are yellow, tomatoes that are red, apples that are juicy, cantaloupes and watermelons that smell good when you cut them. We don't get those in the United States in the wintertime except for a few areas. And if they're ripe, by the time they get to Kansas City, they've traveled at least 1,300 miles. And it takes about 2 weeks. And if they were ripe when they left the farm, they're rotted by the time they get to me. So we have to supplement with certain supplements to maintain our health when we can't get the stuff from the fruits and vegetables that we eat or the foods. So let's talk about really how important are these nutrients. Let's look at heart disease, okay? One of the things that free radicals do to our blood vessels is it causes the oxidation of a certain portion of the cholesterol. Cholesterol is not the dangerous thing. It's the LDL fraction, the low density lipoprotein fraction, excuse me, that actually gets oxidized and will form a plaque. And the plaque causes the narrowing of the arteries, all caused by free radical damage. And one of the vitamins. Now I have to tell you something. I have to clarify something, because Stefan mentioned earlier that we want to keep this in compliance. Do you know that the FDA will not allow me to teach you that vitamin E prevents the oxidation of cholesterol, or that vitamin D cures rickets, or vitamin A cures certain types of blindness, because that would make those three vitamins drugs. And the FDA controls every drug. The only thing, actually the FDA actually now controls obesity. The only thing that the FDA does not control is health and wellness. So I can't tell you those things. And so when I tell you that vitamin E will help, you've got to take that with a grain of salt, because that would make vitamin E a drug, and that means that the drug companies can make it and charge a fortune for it. And anything that contains vitamin E, you might have to go to the grocery store with a prescription from your physician to buy olive oil, which is loaded with vitamin E, or nuts, which is loaded with vitamin E, because now these food products are drugs. Okay? You get the problem that I face as a physician. In my own practice, I was able to say these things. When I teach, the scientific evidence is overwhelming. The vitamin E does this, vitamin D does this, vitamin A does this. Yet, the FDA won't let me say that. So you have to understand where I'm coming from. Well, this is just one example. This is just heart disease. Let's go back to our cell again. When these free radicals attack our cell, what can happen? Well, we can get DNA damage. When we get DNA damage, cells turn funny. They become malignant. They become cancer cells. They don't look the same. They don't act the same, and they look different to our immune systems. Well, if our immune systems are well-tuned, proper nutrition, they can take care of the problems by giving back antioxidants, by eliminating these cancer cells. But if they don't, this is a malignant tumor, and you can see this is normal tissue. This is not very normal tissue, and that's a tissue that's been attacked by free radical damage. So it's a problem, and this DNA damage occurs every day. As a matter of fact, we have about 5,000 malignant cells that we produce every day, and if we have a vigilant immune system, then we can take care of those 5,000 cells by the next morning. All right, let's go back and talk about plants. Why can't we eat right? Well, I mentioned that in Kansas City, we have to, in the wintertime, get our fruits and vegetables transported from someplace else. And again, what happens is most corporate farms in the United States, about 98% of all the farms are owned by a couple of corporations. 50 years ago, 98% of all the farms were owned by individuals. So corporations want to turn out fruits and vegetables very quickly. So they end up just fertilizing with potassium, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And we get very pristine-looking fruits and vegetables. They look beautiful, but they're tasteless. There's no nutrition in them. Someone wants to ask me, what's the best kind of fruit or vegetable to eat? And I said, one that's filled with bugs. And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? I said, bugs will not eat fruits and vegetables that have no nutrition. So if you go into your local grocery store in the wintertime, you see all these beautiful fruits and vegetables and no bugs. Stay away from them. You want something that a worm has eaten or a bug has gone to, because that's where the nutrition is. Well, what happens? Well, whatever we put in the soil ultimately gets sucked up by the roots and into the leaves, and then ultimately into the fruits. And that occurs in the last 72 hours of the ripening process. So if your tomatoes are green, they don't have the lycopene. That's an antioxidant, a nutrient that gets taken from the roots where it's produced and put into the fruit. As a matter of fact, in Kansas, it's called green harvesting. The green tomatoes make it to the Kansas-Colorado border, and then they put a chemical into the air. It's called ethylene gas, and this gas causes green tomatoes to turn red, and they look ripe, but they're not. They don't have the lycopene that they have if they were picked fresh off the vine. So they make it across Kansas, which is another 600 miles, and they get to Kansas City. And those tomatoes that are not red are gassed again with ethylene gas and then put out on the shelf. And if you go into your grocery store and ask the manager in charge of fruits and vegetables, he'll tell you that they do it so that they look pristine. But again, there's no nutrition. And that nutrition comes from the roots, and it's in the last 72 hours. So if you're going to try and eat properly, you want to know who's growing your food and how far it's traveled. And I'll go to an organic market. Now, organic is important because it means that no pesticides are used. That's the difference between organic and not organic. But I will go to locally grown produce. So they can pick it ripe on the vine that day, bring it into the market, I can buy it, and I don't have to worry about 2 weeks shipping and 1,300 miles to get my fruits and vegetables. So I told you about the ripening process. What's important about the ripening process? Why is a red tomato important, or a yellow banana, or a juicy apple? Well, that's because all the chemicals that plants produce, they're called phytochemicals or phytonutrients, they're used to protect the plants. So if it gets cold, or there's lack of water, or too much sun, these chemicals will protect. Well, plants biologically process all these chemicals, so they work for them. And when we eat the plants, or the fruits, or the vegetables, those same chemicals, since our cells are the same as plant cells, basically, we get the benefit of all those. And that's why you are what you eat, but more realistically, you are what you don't eat. Now, let's look at a big problem. The study was done in the United States, and they went from, again, the northeast part of the United States, way up here in Maine, down to Southern California, and they looked at soil, okay? And in the United States, we found that nutritionally, our soil was not as nutrient as it used to be. So even if we grow things properly, we don't put all the extra things in there. I mentioned before that we fertilize with potassium, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Well, that gives pristine-looking fruits and vegetables. But there are 48 other micronutrients, iron, molybdenum, all these things, boron, that you probably never even heard of, that are important for every cellular process in our body, every cellular process in a plant. They're not being put back into the soil. And so look, North America, we're 85% depleted. South America, where we get our fruits and vegetables in the wintertime, 76% depleted. Asia, the same. Australia is the best continent, and they're still more than half depleted. Okay, this was done in 1992. It's gotten worse year by year by year. So let's go on now and talk some more about good food. We have two choices when we buy food. We can go to a health food store where you get food that's picked green. In other words, doesn't have the proper nutrition without pesticides. Or you can go to a regular grocery store and get food picked green with pesticides. The choice is yours. This is about 20 to 40% more expensive. But again, if it's shipped, you don't have the proper nutrition. Dr. Reggie McDaniel, who's a pathologist in Texas, spoke through the Fisher Institute, which is his research arm, about proper nutrition. And I have to credit him with teaching me a lot about nutrition and antioxidants and free radical damage over the last 10 years. This is from one of his lectures, and it's amazing what we don't get in our food anymore. If you go to Europe and you try their fruits and vegetables, it's the same ones that we get here, they taste different. And that's because some of them are trying to go ahead and put the proper food in there. So there are physicians, and there are a few of us that are out there talking about what is best to eat. Now, let's go back and look at some of these important vitamins. Vitamin B2, vitamin B6, a mineral called selenium, copper, calcium. I mean, these are some of the things, if we have a lack of, these are the problems we get. We have a lack of calcium, we also get osteoporosis. And I'm sure a number of us are facing the prospect of taking medications because our bones are becoming brittle as we get older. All right? We're living in a supplement society right now because we're not getting the nutrition that we need in the foods that we're eating. I like to look at it as a formula. What our body needs and what we put in our body adds up to a number. And unfortunately, that number usually is negative, which means that we're not getting what our bodies actually need. And consequently, we're getting deficiencies or insufficiencies. The biggest one right now is vitamin D. Now, I have to tell you, vitamin D is not really a vitamin, but it's been called a vitamin for probably almost 300 years now. And people are hard to change. It's really a steroid. It's almost like cortisone. It actually functions in about 3,000 of our 22,000 genes. Vitamin D deficiency can cause the body to have cancer, pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, skin cancer. Vitamin D fights off infections. So if you're susceptible to the flu and you live in a part of the United States that doesn't get a whole lot of sunlight, and I'm thinking of the Northwest, maybe 6 days of sunlight in Seattle, you need to supplement vitamin D because you're not making it in your skin. It's a sunshine vitamin. Actually, it's a sunshine steroid. But there are other things that cause us to be deficient, even if we try. For instance, drugs. There hasn't really been a single drug, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 antibiotics, that actually cures anything. All it does is mask symptoms until the body recovers. The body has to do all the work. If you take aspirin because your doctor is concerned that you have heart disease and you don't want to clot, you need to take extra B6, B2, C and D, folic acid, iron, and potassium, because aspirin helps, as a side effect, deplete your body of these essential nutrients. If you're on birth control, look at all the vitamins. B1, B2, B3. I mean, it's at least half of the B vitamins. Magnesium, which is important for cellular processes, for contraction of muscles, for good sleep, for regular bowel movements. Zinc is a cofactor in lots of enzymatic processes that occur in the body. If you're on the birth control pill, you become deficient in these, and you need to make sure that you're getting enough in your diet or supplement. And look at antacids, vitamin B1, vitamin A, copper, folic acid, iron. This can lead to anemia. Phosphorus. Phosphorus is important because it helps our bodies maintain that slightly alkaline setting, which is perfect for good cell growth, and our cancer cells like an acidic environment where they can grow and our normal cells don't grow. So I'm going to give you a quote from my friend Dr. McDaniel. He says, you can't treat one symptom with a medication that will in turn cause 10 more symptoms and ever get ahead. If you're not using integrative medical nutrient therapy, in other words, eating the right foods with the right nutrients with all your medications, you can expect the symptoms to outnumber the treatment. And unfortunately, that's what's happening in today's society. Medications help remove essential nutrients. So, we have a lot of us out there. 10,000 of us are turning 65 every day of the year. And we're now beginning to think, how can we live to be 100 years and not regret it? Okay? I mean, this is 3 generations of the same family. You can tell by their basic similarities in their facial expressions. Anti-aging medicine starts with a metabolic approach to nutrition, diet, exercise, and proper supplementation with vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. And I say vitamins and minerals. Most vitamins, most minerals are antioxidant by nature, but we are so used to the fact that the drug companies back in the 1920s and 1930s producing vitamin supplements or mineral supplements that it's going to be hard to change the way society looks at that and just call them strict oxidants. But regardless of where you are, it makes no difference. Rural Iowa, New York City, Los Angeles, we're still all deficient in pretty much the same things. Okay? So let's go back to our 2 women. Again, they're approximately the same age. this individual probably does not have the same number of antioxidants that this individual has. So which life are you designing? Which one are you striving for? And like I said, you are what you eat, or more realistically, you are what you don't eat. I have too much to do. I don't have enough time to do it. So I want to make sure that as I get older, I can still scare my kids when they say, Dad, you're walking too fast. Think of your age, because I can outwalk my kids. They can't keep up with me. And that's because of the way that I've changed in the last 10 years, the way I eat, the way I do things. So, since I told you that what we put in our mouths and what our body needs are not the same amounts, most of us are in a nutritional deficit. So, we need to look at what to supplement. Now, about 10 years ago, another physician who was big into nutritional therapy asked me to look at supplements. And I did what most physicians do, that most society does. I eat right. I get what I need. I don't need to worry about supplements. I'm not interested in supplements. They don't do anything. But so I started looking at the evidence. I realized that some of the things that I did 40 years before, as I was working on my PhD, still apply, and that supplementation is actually very important. So I started retraining myself. I started educating myself. Started looking at the research studies. And every day, folks, 10 or 15 papers on nutrition come out saying this affects this, or you can decrease your risk of this disease by this number of percentage points by just eating this. It's amazing. And I'm getting my students to look at that too. So you have to ask yourself, when you look at a good supplement, is the supplement safe to take? Okay? You also have to ask, is the supplement getting absorbed? Now, I posed the other day to my students, how much calcium does a postmenopausal woman need to take reduce her chances of osteoporosis? And my students are pretty smart. They said 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams a day. And I said, that's what they tell you, but you only need about 60 milligrams a day. And they looked at me like, oh, there's a big difference between 60 milligrams and 2,000. I said, that's because in most of the calcium supplements, only 5% gets absorbed. So if you take 5% of 2,000, that's 100 milligrams. And now you see that you have to take a lot just to get the little that you actually need. About 3 years ago, I was out in Yellowstone speaking about antioxidants, and I made this comment about you need to make sure your supplement gets absorbed. And there's a real simple test, and you can tell this to people that tell you, oh, I go to CVS, I get my stuff on the internet, and it's a good product. It's got all these ingredients in it. Just tell them to take a glass of warm water, 8 ounces of warm water, and put in 8 teaspoons of white vinegar. That simulates what's in our stomachs. Then go ahead and drop your supplement in there. Go get a cup of coffee. Coffee is good for you now. That's what the latest research studies show. There are antioxidants in coffee that help prevent heart disease. So go get your cup of coffee. Then come back half an hour, 45 minutes later. If your supplement is still there on the bottom of the glass, which most are, it'll never dissolve. So I said that, and a fellow in a uniform, a park ranger for Yellowstone, raised his hand and said, not only is Dr. Organ correct about that, but the name of the vitamin still is on the vitamin as it comes out into the porta potties in the park. So make sure the supplement that you're taking gets absorbed. And then the most important thing is don't ever put anything in your body if you don't have proven health benefits. Okay? So this is really important. And again, the FDA tells me that I can't tell you that vitamin D cures rickets or vitamin C prevents and treats scurvy. But talk to the British Navy. For the last 277 years, they've been called limeys because lemons and limes contain enough vitamin C to prevent scurvy on long voyages. And what's unusual about vitamin C is that it's a water-soluble vitamin, which means that we have to take vitamin C every day. We can't store it. Vitamins A, vitamin D, vitamin E, those are, and K, those are the fat-soluble ones. So if you take some today, a week from now, it's still going to be in your body because it gets stored in fat. But the water-soluble ones, they have to be done every day. And more research is done and published every day that show that there are proven health benefits for a lot of the foods that we eat. Okay? So you want to make sure that the company that you get your products from, this is, again, is it safe to take? Don't have any pesticides, don't have any contaminants, but they use good manufacturing products. And companies that do test for contaminants reject as much as 30% of the ingredients. If it's not potent, if it's contaminated, it shouldn't be in any of the things that we eat, okay? Do they get absorbed? If you're paying $30 for a supplement and you're only absorbing 10% or $3 worth, you're wasting $27. That's a good thing to remember. We actually only absorb about 5% of most of them because they're filled with binders or fillers that prevent the absorption. And most of the supplements that are on the market, there are 4,000 supplement companies out there producing things. Most of them are synthetic. They're made by a pharmacy or a pharmaceutical company. They don't act in the body the same way as the ones that we eat. So you want to make sure that whatever you take is in a form that's biologically active. In other words, a plant is in there first. And in a minute, I'm going to tell you some of the things that I take, and all the things that I take have been processed by a plant first. They're all whole food sourced. They're all absorbed about 100%, and they do to my cells the same as they do the cells where they came from. Okay, so don't waste your money on something that's not going to get absorbed. Okay, and then the other thing that's important, are there proven health benefits? Now, the physicians get every year from the drug companies a book called The Physician's Desk Reference. It's called a PDR. Some of you may have seen it. You can find them in the bookstores. They're very expensive unless the drug company gives it to you for free. But recently, there's a PDR of non-drugs, PDR for health supplements and food products. And they've been researched, and it's a good thing to look at if you're curious to find out, does vitamin D really do what it's supposed to do? Or does vitamin A do what it's supposed to do? Or does acai berry do what it's supposed to do? You can go ahead and look those up. All the scientific studies are there, and the PDR will tell you whether or not echinacea really is good for a cold, or is vitamin D better, okay? So you want to look at, are there proven health benefits, okay? So if you aren't taking a product that is proven effective, what are you taking? And is it safe for you to take, okay? So you want to make sure that the company also does other things that are important, that they validate, they document, that lot number from one source and another source are the same. So when it says there's 100 milligrams of this on there, that every time you buy another bottle, there's 100 milligrams. You want to make sure that that's there. So they do all sorts of testing. You can see it's required for pharmacies. It's required for over-the-counter medications. But sometimes it's optional for nutrition because the FDA doesn't look at nutrition the same way that we do, fortunately. So when you look at this peanut, what's inside that counts, all right? So there are other things that I'm not going to go into today because we don't have enough time. But I just want to briefly talk about a concept called network antioxidants. All right? That means that some antioxidants should be taken together. The following 5 are network: glutathione, alpha-lipoic acid, CoQ10, vitamins C and E. And the reason why they're networked is that glutathione, this one right here, This is the master antioxidant of the body. You can go to a supplement store and you can see products that contain glutathione, but they're worthless because it's a complex protein, and when you swallow it, what does your body do? Breaks it down. There's nothing on the other side that says it needs to be made back up into glutathione. So you need to make sure that you're taking the precursors so that you can make your own glutathione. It's made in the liver. But what's important about these 5 is that as glutathione gets used up, in other words, it gives off its electron, vitamin C and E, coenzyme Q10, alpha-lipoic acid help recharge the glutathione with electrons so that it becomes more effective. So it becomes self-sustaining, and it's important for our health. That's what it means to be networked, okay? If you ask a health professional about which antioxidant you should take, which ones are important, you'll get 100 different answers. But most would agree that the minimum to take are vitamins A, D, C, and E, ubiquinol, which is the right form of CoQ10. And I'll tell you, if you go to Whole Foods, you go to CVS pharmacy, or you get on the internet and you look for CoQ10, 99% of the time you will find the form that is not right for the body. This is the reduced form. This is the active form that's important. And you can find it. Fish oil, resveratrol. Thank our grapes and our wine for that. Quercetin. Now, this is an interesting one. Everybody's heard the expression, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. It's because of this antioxidant that actually boosts our immune system. This NAC, N-acetylcysteine, this is a precursor for glutathione. Selenium, precursor for glutathione. And sometimes you can find supplements that will say glutathione precursors, and that's important. So I played around last night, and I said, all right, let me just look at some internet sites. And if I were to order just these ingredients, it's about $183 for these antioxidants. That's a lot of money for not very many things. I take a few supplements every day from a company that produces them from a whole food source under good manufacturing practices, and they're fully absorbed. And the supplements that I take, the individual ingredients have been shown to have a benefit to my health and wellness. Now, if I look at it, price comparison, it's about the same. It's a little more expensive to take the ones that I do. Just if I'm looking at those ones from the last slide, the vitamins A, D, C, glutathione, the whole 9 yards. But in addition to that, I get well over 100 additional nutrients, antioxidants, minerals, vitamins that I didn't even talk about before. So if you go back now to that $183 figure that I gave you for those supplements and say, all right, if I want to add acai berry or bilberry, or I want to add coffee bean extract, if I start adding that up and ordering them individually, I'm now spending $500 to $600 a month for the same thing that I'm spending a little over $200 a month for. So, again, I get the added benefit of over 100 additional antioxidants and nutrients with the ones that I previously mentioned. And that's it. I'm sure we have a lot of questions to ask, but I just took you on a journey and told you about antioxidants, and I have to tell you that it changes every day. If you don't read the literature, and you don't ask questions, more things are coming out to help us get to those golden years as healthy as we were when we were kids. So that's important.
Thank you very much, Dr. Organ. We've got quite a nice presentation, and I think people understand now the value of having a lot of the great vitamin, mineral, antioxidants to protect us from all of these degenerative diseases, basically. And so thank you for that. We do have a number of questions. I don't know if you can read them on your end. If you prefer, I can go over them. What would you do?
I'm seeing them flash.
So at the top of your screen, In the little icons, there's one that's a little bubble like a chat, and it has, you see moving lines. Chat, if you click on that, it's going to open, and you will see the question.
Let me see some of these. Okay. Our local news had a report stating that organic has no advantage over regular produce. I read those reports. I actually reported it to my students when it came out a couple of weeks ago. And superficially, that's correct. And part of the problem is I wouldn't get organic from South America to the United States in the wintertime because, again, the produce is not ripe. So the only difference between organic and not organic is that there's no pesticides. So I make it an effort to go ahead and get locally grown organic that's picked ripe on the vine or pulled out of the soil at the right time so that, yes, it's a distinct advantage and about 40% more nutritious than non-organic. Okay? So I would still prefer to get organic, and I can tell you that when I cook organically, it tastes different because of the nutrients that are in it. So again, in the Kansas City area, we have community networks where you get actually ripe produce brought to the market that you can purchase, and that's important. So superficially, yeah, there's no advantage, but if you know where your food's coming from, it's a distinct advantage. I also see that a question, do our RX Optimals contain all the vitamins and minerals and antioxidants that I recommend? It's about 90%. A couple of the other products supplement the other 10%. But, yeah, we have everything in it, and it's food sourced, it's 100% absorbed, and it all has science behind it. So, yeah, our Optimals are actually the best on the market. What is the other 10%? Okay, Patty, the ones that I would recommend. Can I say that, Stefan? No?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Okay, Rejuvenex and Vinali will give you the other 10%, as well as Omega Q. So Omega Q gives you ubiquinol, the heart antioxidant, gives you the fish oil. Rejuvenex gives you all of the super fruits, all of the bioflavonoids. This is a specific class of antioxidants that help protect plants, but also helps protect our bodies. You get all of that from Rejuvenex. And Vinali has vitamin C and grapeseed extract, which helps with the scientific studies show high blood pressure and cholesterol. And so these are the supplements that I take on a daily basis. And I can tell you that I walked into the doctor's office last week, and the first thing they do is they weigh me, and the nurse looked at me and she said, "Are you losing weight on purpose?" I said, "Yes." And she says, "You've lost a lot in the last 3 months." I said, "Yeah, about 30 pounds. And then she says, "And what medicines are you on?" And I told her what medicine. She says, "You're not on this and you're not on that." And I said, "No, I found out I don't have to be on it now that I've lost the weight and I'm eating properly." So it's a lot different for me. My kids can't understand why I can outlast them. So there's another question here. It says, do I have a website or a book? I don't have a book. I have a lot of blog articles. And one of the websites that Marcus Cox and I maintain with our internet guru, Jason Blair, is certifiedsupplements.com. And I talk about the scientific basis for supplementation. And then we have an rxinternetteam.com where we do product reviews. And so that would be the best information, and that's available for use for anybody on our team. I think I got all the questions answered.
Yeah, I think you did. You probably covered everything, yeah?
I hope so. It's a lot. It's a lot to cover, but the most important thing I want everybody to understand is you don't have to be an MD, PhD to tell people about this. You just have to speak from the heart. You just have to know that we're exposed to things that we weren't exposed to when we were young, and it doesn't matter where we are in the world. We're all exposed to it, and there are things that we can do. Can things change for 60-year-olds? I'm 64. Yeah, things can change significantly. I have esophagitis by pouring the contents into juice water. Can this be absorbed fine in the body too? Absolutely. That's what's nice about our products. The two websites that I talked about, certifiedsupplements.com and RX
Supplements
Internet.
with an S.
With an S.
Yep.
And then rxinternetteam.com. And that's available for all of us to use.
And so, guys, what you need to look at is, we went over this in about an hour. All right, we did a little bit of talking at the beginning, some questions at the end. Let's say about an hour. So we could take this presentation and show this and do a 1-hour presentation, and you could also sit down with someone and go over this in about 15, 20 minutes. And I've done this numerous times. All right? And so the slides just help me guide the conversation. I actually use Tim's 2 flyers that he has on his website. Actually, he's got the flyers on firstclassmlmtools.com. And one of the flyers says, "Why do I age, get sick, get diseases?" All right? And so what I would do is, instead of bringing my slides with me if I'm meeting with someone, it's too formal. It looks too much as a sales pitch. So if I have that little flyer and I just point to pictures, then it makes it more natural. And so I would just find it. All right? Now, some people are going to say, wow, there's a lot of content there. Well, we're going to have the recording. You can go over it and listen a couple of times. But basically, each slide, just a couple words that you say about each slide. And so so that's why it doesn't have to take that long. Take the slide where it says antacid and aspirin. Well, all you could say is if you take drugs like, aspirin, well, all of the vitamin minerals that your body is depleted of because of that are all of these. So normally the doctor should actually recommend you to take a vitamin mineral supplement to compensate for what you're depleted of because you take this drug, but they usually don't. All right, and that's it. That slide is over. Go to the next one. All right, so that's why you can do this very simply in a couple minutes, go over this. And I've done this so many times, and that's why, now I can sit down with someone and go over this, and now at the end they realize, oh my goodness, I do need to take supplements, because that's directly linked. Antioxidants are directly linked to degenerative diseases. The more antioxidants you have, the less risk you have to develop those. And so now that they make the connection, they understand, I need this. And so then you go into how you select a good supplement, and there's the 3 things that Dr. Alan Organ, went over, and you just cover them, and you explain that, and that's it. So now you have someone that truly has all the need to know about why supplements are important and why you need them, and why you don't get everything you need from the food. So just wanted to add that here, because I think sometimes you look at that and, well, yeah, there's so much information. Well, not that much. Yes, there is, but you can do it 1 hour, but you can do also 15 minutes. So, good. Well, I think we've got a lot of great things here. The order website is our personal RX website. Okay. Was there anything else you saw in the questions, Doctor, or we're good?
I think we've covered everything.